Hi, everyone. Well, it's hard to believe that Labor Day was yesterday, and now we are in the fifth week of the semester. That means we're about a third of the way through. So, we're just trucking right along here. So, I just want to say a few words here. First of all, these emails wanting to know why you're getting such low grades on your discussions, I would recommend that you go into the discussion board rubric and procedures folder and read those instructions carefully. They clearly state that your first posting has to be no later than Wednesday, and you have to respond to a minimum of 2 postings. If you're failing these discussion postings, it's probably because you're not doing one or both of those things. So, I want to make it clear because I've said this in several emails now. This is not a class that you're going to sign in on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. and pass. It's just not going to happen. All right. You need to sign in at least twice a week. The syllabus says that. You took a syllabus quiz. You know that. So don't if you want to know why you got low grades on something, I don't mind you asking me. But when you're not reading the directions, that gets a little bit irritating. So make sure first posting no later than Wednesday. That means you should have read the material by then. And then sometime later in the week, respond to a minimum of 2 of your classmates' discussions. So if you do that, you'll start seeing your grades on your discussion postings go up. Also, these discussions do require some thought. So you're not getting full credit if all you're doing is saying, I agree with you to one of your classmates. You have to put some thought into it. You have to have a discussion, not just post something really quickly and then tell 2 people, I agree with you, end of story. Right? So take these discussions seriously and post some thoughtful postings. Don't just throw up a bunch of vague generalities. And also use direct quotes in those papers. I graded the papers from week 3, and several of you did not read those directions either because it says you have to have direct quotes. In the discussion boards, you don't necessarily have to have direct quotes. If you do have them, you need to format them and cite them properly. But you do still need to point to things. You can't just say, I read this and I liked it. You have to say something along the lines of, as I read this, I saw, and then tell me what you saw. Okay? So, this week's first posting question, by the way, is going to be a comparison between Lord Byron and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And you'll see what that is when you go into the discussion boards before Wednesday, or no later than Wednesday. You can do it on Wednesday, but, no later than that. All right, so this week, I know the syllabus says there's a project. I'm not going to make you do a project this week. I figured the discussion boards and then the exam on Romanticism would be enough. We're a third of the way through the semester now, so we're taking the Romanticism exam this week, and then next week we're going to start the Victorian period, and we'll spend 5 weeks or so on that, and then we'll spend the final 5 weeks on the 20th century. This week you are reading the late Romantics. The Romantic period, as far as literary periods, was actually a pretty brief one. It started around 1795, and by the time that, and your Introduction to Romanticism said this, by the time that 1832 rolled around, the 3 people you're going to read this week died at very young ages. John Keats was very obsessed with immortality, and you're going to see that theme in both the Ode on a Grecian Urn and Ode to a Nightingale. Think about eternal life, how the Nightingale song has been around forever and will continue to be around forever. Even if the bird itself dies, the Nightingale's song is immortal. And then, of course, the Ode on a Grecian Urn talks about, living forever, but at what cost, right? So, like when the lover's almost getting that kiss from his girlfriend, and he just can't get there. And he'll be like that forever and ever. Now, she'll always be young and pretty. He'll always be young and handsome. But they'll always be just almost at that kiss without quite getting it. So, it's ironic that John Keats was so obsessed with eternal life because he did not live very long. He died of tuberculosis after taking care of his sick brother at about the age of 25 or 26. He was very young when he passed. And then the other 2, Byron and Shelley. Now, all 3 of these men were good friends with each other. If you've heard the name Shelley, you probably heard of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. She ended up as Percy Bysshe Shelley's wife. So during their lifetimes, Percy Bysshe Shelley was probably more well known than Mary Shelley, Most people remember Mary Shelley more now because of Frankenstein. But we're not going to read Frankenstein, but you are going to read two poems by Percy Bysshe Shelley. One's called To Wordsworth. And this, he's going to lament the fact that Wordsworth was a groundbreaker. You know, he was a rebel when he was younger. But now, several years later, he has become a part of the establishment that these late romantics are going to rebel against. And Mont Blanc, which is based on a real mountain in France, talks about how nature is strong and powerful. Like the earthquake demon teaches her children how to destroy and things like that. Whereas, Wordsworth was all about nature, being God in nature and things like that. Shelley actually was an atheist, so he didn't believe that God was in nature. He believed that nature was powerful and that, we get what we need to live out of it, but that's not why nature exists. And then there's a really good comparison you can do. In fact, I think that's what your opening discussion board question is going to be. When you read Lord Byron, by the way, Shelley also died at a very young age. He died in a boating accident. Lord Byron was an adventurer, and he was also quite the lover of both women and men, it turns out. Byron was always looking for that next great adventure. So he died at a young age by going to fight in a war. But before he died, he wrote some great stuff. And so you're going to read only Canto 2 from Don Juan. And I'll provide that for you. And then, of course, you'll read She Walks in Beauty by Lord Byron as well. And both of those readings are going to be, actually, both those readings and To Wordsworth are all going to be provided in the folder. They are not going to be in our textbook, but I'll have links to them so that you can read those. Canto 2 from Don Juan is actually, which is often pronounced incorrectly as Don Juan, it's about a boating adventure. But it's a little bit different boating adventure than what Coleridge had in Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So I'm going to have you look at those two and tell me what you see similar between the two and what you see different between the two. Because they are both still parts of the Romantic canon. She Walks in Beauty was written about his cousin. Her name was Anne Wilmot. And she, she's beautiful not only on the outside, she's very pleasing to the eye, but she's also beautiful on the inside. So he writes that story about her. So, the exam will cover everything from Wordsworth to this week's three authors. It will have both general knowledge and it will have direct quotes from the readings. So, I'll have a study guide for you in the folder, which you can then take a look at to see what you need to know in order to do well on the exam. So, I try to keep these videos brief. I see that I'm running a little long this week. But I wanted to make it clear that the discussion postings are a week-long endeavor. They are not a Sunday endeavor. And I want you to get some idea of what to look for as you read this younger generation of romantics and how they, in some ways, were a reaction against the older romantics, such as Wordsworth and Coleridge. Especially when you read To Wordsworth by Shelley, and you see that he's lamenting the fact that the once great William Wordsworth is now just like every other conservative in the world. So, with that in mind, I look forward to seeing the discussion postings and have a great week.